Welcome, dear listener, to the ghostly broadcast, Paranormal Station. Coming across the airwaves from my farm of supernatural harvests, I am your host, Timothy, where I bring testimonies of the abnormal and unknown from all over the world to your ears. Tonight, we look to Oceania to share stories of new homes. No matter who you are or where you come from, we all share an intrinsic aversion to strange new places. We are kept awake in those first few nights by a strange unfamiliarity, an automatic survival mechanism held over from our evolution. Sometimes we're right to trust our instincts, as we're about to see in these haunting testimonies. Settle in, listeners, for our first letter from Derrick in Sydney, Australia. Dear Timothy, my name's Derrick, and I work in software in the middle of Sydney. When I got my first job there, I saved up enough to rent a small place. For your listeners who aren't burdened with having to find somewhere to live in Sydney's broken rental market, you essentially pay an arm and a leg for hot, sticky garbage. In my case, that was precisely what I'd ended up with. The place I'd found was a tiny studio in the area, the part of town where people park their cars on the grass and adorn their windows with bars. My new little hermitage was smack bang in the middle of it. The letting agent charging me through the nose for the apartment clearly didn't have any recent pictures of it. When I got there, the place was more than a mess. It looked like a full-blown drug den and smelled just as bad. There was rubbish everywhere. The whole place stank of stale cigarette smoke and ammonia. Strange graffiti that made no sense to me was strewn across the walls, along with mindless ramblings of the druggies that used to live there. I managed to wrangle some of my buddies to help clean it. We made a day of it with a slab and a Barbie, but it still took us well into the night before anyone could call the place habitable. But the deed was done, and I could spend my first night in my new apartment. Despite the horrendous exhaustion, I couldn't sleep at all. It's like I was wired to a caffeine drip. I was antsy and anxious. I tossed and turned all night. When dawn broke, it was like I hadn't slept at all. I was in a sickly daze of intoxication brought on by this bout of insomnia, and it didn't get any better after that. I had a few days to settle in before resuming work, and I didn't sleep for any of them. It didn't matter how tired I was. As soon as I was in that apartment, with my head on the pillow, it was like someone had shot me up with adrenaline. My days slipped through my fingers while I shuffled through them like a zombie. Work was sympathetic at first, but I was written up after a week when I couldn't finish anything. I knew I'd lose the job if I couldn't get this sorted. One night, I staggered home to a break-in. Nothing was taken, and the only thing that had happened was a considerable graffiti tag above my sofa with the word "Sleep Beater" in large blue bubble letters. Sat on the coffee table was a small back of Power. I like a beer, but I've not touched anything beyond that for my entire life. I have to admit, Timothy, it was pretty tempting, but I wanted to be sure. I called my friend around to help me make sense of it. He looked at the stuff in the bag and said, "That's meth, mate. That stuff will keep you up for days. What are you doing with it?" I explained that whoever sprayed my wall must have left it there. We flushed the meth, scrubbed the wall, and I turned in after my mate left. My sleeplessness had reached a fever pitch by that point. I tossed and turned. I was sweating, clawing at my eyes and itching my skin. I desperately wanted to sleep, but I just couldn't. The walls started to close in. Scribblings of gibberish graffiti with odd, harsh words began to appear on the walls as if an invisible hand was spraying them as they went. The fresh paint dribbled down the walls in a haze of sickly color. The smell of ammonia permeated the air. I threw the sheets off of my bed and scrambled into some clothes. I wanted to get out of there, I figured I'd drive for a while, then sleep in my car. I was stopped when a skinny, twisted figure stepped out of the darkness. He was rake-thin, bald, and covered in scabs and scratches. He lit a lighter and held it against the glass bowl of a pipe. He took a deep drag and gave out a rasping cough as he exhaled. Then he looked me in the eyes and smiled wickedly. With his pipe hand outstretched, he offered it to me. "You look like shit, mate," he croaked. "Here, have a hit." I got out of there as fast as possible. I told my mate that the previous tenants had broken in and I needed a place to stay. I stayed at his place and called the police in the morning. They didn't find anyone there but found the place in a state worse than I'd seen it when I first moved in. They said that the previous tenant would let his junkie mate stay all the time, and that they'd probably come back thinking it was unoccupied after he'd died. I asked them about the old tenant, but they didn't have that much to say. Some junkie who wanted to keep himself awake. He used to rant and rave about angels and demons. Drove himself insane before he clocked it, the officer told me. I didn't go back after that. My things had been ransacked anyway, and insurance covered it as a break-in. I found somewhere else and got on with my life. I'd been awake for days and would have known if someone had broken in. I'm convinced the old meth head had been with me the whole time. He was watching me, keeping me awake and trying to drive me insane. He probably still is. Yours sincerely, Derrick. Thank you for your testimony, Derrick. Although every person who falls into addiction is a tragedy, for all who attempt to break the cycle with the help of friends or loved ones, some simply refuse to be helped. The same could be said for the spirit world. Some just refuse to move on. Our next testimony is from Kristina in New Zealand. Dear Timothy, I'm writing to you because this is something that many experts have dismissed before. I was repeatedly told that I just wasn't doing it right or needed to hire the right people. Absolutely nothing worked, and in the end, I found the reason why. I've been in my new apartment for 3 months now. First week or so wasn't bad. It was quite a new build, and for the price, a decent place to live. Then I started to see some roaches. Not too many at first, but they always say if you see one cockroach, there are 100 more that you don't. So I got the spray, I got the poison. I did all the right things you're meant to do to keep them at bay, but no matter what I did, the problem just got so much worse. The resilient little buggers would simply not die. I had an exterminator come twice at my own expense, as the landlord wouldn't do anything about it. They told me there wasn't a single bug in sight every time they checked the place while I was at work. The exterminator said the same, but they did their job anyway. It seemed they would only ever show up at night just for me. I figured I'd start taking pictures of them to ensure I wasn't going insane. I wish I hadn't now. Lo and behold, the pictures came up with nothing. I tried my phone at first, and the pictures wouldn't save or send to anyone. I tried an old digital camera I dug out from some travel trips, and the playback function would say data corrupted. My last night in that place was a week ago. I'd hit my final rope with them. The roaches were invading every single inch of space in my home. They were in my waking hours and then finally crept into my dreams. I felt them wriggling and crawling across my body, which snapped me awake. I threw the bedsheets off, and I was covered in them. I frantically beat them off of me with my hands. I sprang out of bed and ran into the living room. A pile of them were wriggling and crawling in the center of the carpet. They'd made a writhing mass of moving insects into a black, brown, shimmering, wriggling plinth. Sat atop it was a human skull. I was frozen. I stared into the hollow, black eye sockets. Its jaw dropped open, and I jumped with fright. From its mouth, it poured a mass of even more roaches. Not just roaches, but maggots, flies, centipedes, and all manner of rotten, crawling things. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed some cooking oil spray, and doused the wretched thing. With a candle lighter in the other hand, I sprayed the flame, and burning oil shot out with a loud flaming jet. My living room was up in smoke and flames almost instantly. I ran out of the door in my pajamas, turning in the doorway to see for one last time that I wasn't crazy. The skull and the burning mass of insects burned in the orange cleansing flames. I don't know who or what that was, but it was beyond any kind of infestation. This thing wanted me and me alone to suffer. It's been a week, and I've been staying with my mom. So far, I haven't seen any more roaches, but still I feel like I can hear them. That soft clicking of carapace as they crawl all over each other. And whose skull was it, and why does it keep staring at me when I close my eyes? Yours, Kristina. Thank you for that harrowing testimony, Kristina. While it's perfectly natural to fear the things that crawl in the night, the world beyond can play on our fears to make them into something abnormal and supernatural. Our next letter comes from Inina in Papua New Guinea. Dear Timothy, my name's Inina, and I'm writing to you because I want my story to be heard. It's a story I share with many of my people from Poem City. The stories that are unheard and forgotten. Another tale that the dead ones can't speak, but I'm not dead. I live. I come from Koki, just about a kilometer from the capital. I lost my brother to the rascals and was left to care for our mum. I thought I had been blessed when I was hired as an au pair for a wealthy expat couple living in Ella Beach's suburbs. It was a live-in job, but I could visit as many weekends as I wanted because I was so close to home. At least, that was what they told me. It didn't take long before I realized I'd signed my life away to some monstrous people. When I met the mother and father, they seemed like a lovely couple. They were moving into their new home with me in tow, so that it would be an experience for all of us. The mother had redesigned the interior herself, and it showed. The place was magnificent. Their son was quiet, but I didn't think that was unusual. Kids always have difficulty adjusting when their parents move around a lot. They don't exactly make friends easily with the locals. The weeks flew by, and I was content with my work. I was getting paid well enough to keep my mother happy and healthy, but I couldn't connect with their son, no matter how hard I tried. He was only 10, but he seemed so much older. One day, while I was helping him with his homeschooling, he sighed and told me his parents were preparing to move again. I asked him how he knew, and he said, "I always know. They go to their special room and sing their songs. They think I'm asleep, but the singing wakes me up. I wish they'd stop." That night, I heard exactly what he meant. I heard choral singing like in a church, but this wasn't gospel. It was chanting, slow and guttural, in a language I couldn't understand. I rose from my bed and walked out into the hallway. I could see their son standing in his. He turned to see me and put his finger to his lips in a shushing gesture. I walked over to him and whispered, "Is that your mummy and daddy?" He nodded. I tiptoed down the hallway to where the chanting was coming from. Inside the parents' bedroom, I saw a light coming through their walk-in closet. I inched further into the room, and saw the mother. She wore robes and hoisted a shiny metal cup to the sky. An arm grabbed me around the neck, and I felt the cold steel pinprick of a knife blade prodding my throat. "Stop. It's too early," the mother said calmly. "Well, what are we going to do with her?" the father who had me by the neck barked. I heard the young boy behind us scream, "Let her go." The mother turned in shock to see her child standing in the doorway to their secret room. "Let her go," the boy growled in a deep, low, two-tonal voice. The voice wasn't his. It was something else. Father let me go and turned to face his son. He took one step and then paused, shaking and quivering. In a flash of glinting steel and crimson blood, he drove the knife into his neck repeatedly until he fell, choking on his blood. The mother screamed and ripped at her face, neck, and chest. She was clawing open her face, pulling off chunks of flesh with her nails. I looked at the little boy, but saw a tiny black figure with a shadowy face. A black demon with no trace left of the sweet little child. I darted past him and ran for the door. I didn't look back and escaped into the night, returning to Koki in a cab. I've not been back to the city since. I didn't hear much after that. The couple were wealthy, well-connected expats. The police are in the rich's pockets. Nothing would have been done anyway. Still, who knows how many more people like me were killed by these people and never found. These monsters played God with their money and power and got their just desserts in return. I'm haunted by what became of their son, though. I'm not one to seek answers, and I hope he can lead a normal life afterwards. Something tells me that normal won't be possible for him anymore. Yours, Inina. Thank you for your testimony, Inina. For as long as I live, I will never understand those who think so highly of themselves that they would play with unknown forces that we could never hope to understand. To seek and be curious is one thing, but to try and play with it is another entirely. Our last testimony of the evening comes from Budi in Jakarta. Dear Timothy, I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Budi, and I have a story about a friend of mine. This man was a very good friend, and I'd like to leave his name out to protect his family and loved ones. My friend had a sordid past. He had abandoned his home to make a better life for himself in the city. His mother and father cursed him as an ungrateful son for leaving his home behind, but to hear my friend tell it, he had worked hard to support his siblings and family. He was never allowed to want for himself. It finally broke him, and that's how he ended up in Jakarta, where we met. When he'd managed to get on his feet, I helped him move into his first apartment. It wasn't anything special. It was old and a bit worn down, but to him it was his palace. He was so proud to have come this far. Not long after, he heard the news of his father's passing. He asked me to mind his place while he was home for the funeral. I gladly obliged, not just for my friend, but it gave me a chance to get away from my roommates for a few days. I slept uncomfortably that night. I could hear scratching coming from inside the walls. I gave the wall a few thuds with the butt of my fist, and the scratching subsided. I still didn't get much sleep, though. When my friend returned, he thanked me for taking care of his place and said he needed a few days to gather his thoughts. It had been an emotional reckoning for him. He explained that his father had never stopped cursing him for leaving them. His father had languished in anger and disappointment to his dying breaths. It had made him a bitter and resentful man who had spilt it onto the rest of his family and the village. My friend did not receive a warm welcome home. I left my friend to it, but after a week of not hearing from him, I decided to check in. Just a phone call to see how he was doing. I'm fine, he said, while he made exacerbated grunts. It's just these damn rats. They're everywhere in the walls. I asked him if he needed help, but he said he was fine. Some days later, I got a call from him. It was the middle of the night, and I was in bed but not quite asleep, so as not to hear my phone. The rats. They're in the walls. They're watching me all the time. Please, I need help, he said, panicking. I made my way to his place in the middle of the night. I banged on his door, but he didn't answer. When I managed to find the building supervisor, they were dismissive of the rackets and simply handed me the spare key. When I opened my friend's apartment door, I was hit with a stench of rot and feces. There were rat droppings everywhere, but that wasn't the worst part. Hung by a lamp cord in the center of the room was my friend's body. Below his feet was a twisted, tangled mess of dead rats, all tied by the tails. My friend didn't deserve to die, Timothy. He really didn't. His last few days of life were cursed and mired in tragedy. None of it was his fault. I watched a good man's life fall to ruin in days. All over some silly dishonor that his father couldn't let go. I'm sure of it. There was nothing natural about what happened to him. This was brought on by anger and hatred that was inflicted upon him. I hope that the next life is kinder to him than this one was. Thank you, Booty. Thank you for your testimony, Booty. Cultures throughout the world follow a similar doctrine of honoring thy mother and father. Obviously, life can become a little more complicated than that. Still, it should never warrant such vitriol as to bring on the paranormal. This concludes this evening's broadcast. I've been your host, Timothy, here on my farm. If you enjoyed tuning in to our ghostly broadcast, Paranormal Station, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. We constantly seek new testimonies to log and catalog the paranormal and unknown. That world is out there, and I endeavor to plant those seeds of curiosity on my farm in your minds. Have a good night, listeners.